Hey everyone, and welcome back to What's the Plan, the podcast where we dive into the matters of our careers in the architecture and urban planning field. I'm Haley.
And I'm Andrea. So Haley, what's the plan this week?
This week's plan is all about the circular economy.
So like the previous episode, this is another in the hotspot, where one of us will be put in the hotspot by answering questions on a specific topic we want to explore.
These topics include concepts that one of us are unfamiliar with, giving us a chance to learn alongside the listeners as the host in the hotspot teaches us all about it.
So unlike our previous episode about the sharing economy, where I knew next to nothing about it, this time around I've actually heard a bit about the circular economy.
Okay, so what have you heard about the circular economy?
Most of what I know is mostly in reference to like products or materials. But from my approach, the understanding of it is more so of a life cycle analysis or approach. But luckily for myself and our audience, you are the de facto expert between the two of us.
Between the two of us, let's make it clear.
Yeah. So Haley, what is a circular economy?
Okay, so I'm sure you've heard of the term one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yes, for sure.
So basically, the circular economy is pretty much that, but on a more complex level.
Okay.
So similar to the sharing economy, the circular economy is based on three principles, which are all driven by design. The first one is eliminate waste and pollution. The second is circulate products and materials. And the third is regenerate nature.
So in a way, could that be reduced to like reduce, reuse, and recycle?
Honestly, yes.
Wow, okay.
But I guess that would be like the most simplest of terms. There is a little bit more to that. So essentially, in a circular economy, nothing is waste. The circular economy retains and recovers as much value as possible from resources by reusing, repairing, repurposing, or recycling products. So it is reuse, reduce, recycle, but with more re's in it.
Okay.
It's about using and seeing the value in resources and using them wisely, and thinking about waste as a resource instead of a cost, and also about finding innovative ways to better the environment and economy.
So once again, how does this relate to planning?
So in general, the circular economy should be applied by all industries, but as planners and even as architects, we should implement circular economy policies in our practice because we need to learn to develop cities and buildings as sustainably as possible. So let me ask you this.
Okay.
As an aspiring architect, how do you think architects can implement the circular economy into practice?
So as I mentioned before, like most of what I know is in terms of like materials that we use when in terms of building. So I guess one method of doing so is that when we're actually designing these buildings to be built, not only do we like take, I guess, schedules or like list everything that we require to be put into these buildings, but also look into, I guess, how long these materials will last, when do they need to be replaced, the impacts or the ecological footprint that it takes to make to these items, and also looking at like how long or can it be recycled and elsewhere afterwards when perhaps the building is no longer in use or when the material is damaged and needs to be replaced. If there's another like method to use it. So I guess it more so like a way people can implement this into our design, and perhaps like this might not be just like just something that you add on to the project by like the project team currently, but like it would be really helpful if there was perhaps like a sustainable expert or an architect that specializes in this kind of like circular economy or sort of material takeoff to kind of look into it and have like a full-on role for that person and to like look at every project that someone does. Because I think a lot of times it's like we kind of are taught to like be mindful of the materials you use, but then when it comes to actually working in the workplace, it's like unless you work for a company where their whole like model or mission statement is be sustainable, you don't actually like look into like the whole lifestyle or the life cycle of your materials. You just look at it as in like, okay, I need this, and then how many do we need, and that's pretty much it.
So one way that I think, like, especially as planners and architects, because the industry is so similar, is that we could work hand in hand. And so, for example, when a building needs to be developed in a place that's already so developed, let's say Toronto, for example, there is just really no place to develop a new building unless an old one is being demolished.
Yes.
And so in a case like that, we can really easily put into play the concepts of a circular economy by using the materials from that building that's being demolished that can be reused, and using those to develop the new building. And so as you said, like having a sustainability consultant, for example, to coordinate this between the building that's to be demolished and the building that's to be developed is a really good way to implement this into our industry.
And like speaking of that, it kind of made me think of like when you do have a building that is no longer in use, maybe another method of like rather than demolishing it is actually using the core of a structure for another purpose.
Yeah.
So like you see this sort of in a lot of examples with like hotels, whereas like after being used as a hotel, it becomes like transformed into a student residence. And like there was actually like a case like this downtown near where I lived, and I forget the name of the hotel it used to be, but now it's Parkside Residence, and a lot of Ryerson students live there.
Wow.
So it's like they saved the whole structure of the building because concrete is not cheap, and like concrete cannot really be recycled to another location. So like that's another way that I thought of.
Yeah, so there's actually a term for this in our industry. Do you know what this term I'm referring to is called?
No.
So this term is adaptive reuse.
Oh, yes.
Where with the case of the hotel being transformed into something different, it's such, not only is it such a sustainable practice, but to be honest, like on an aesthetic in an aesthetic standpoint, it is also so pleasing to look at if it's done well, of course.
Yeah.
But keeping like the structures of the old concept and implementing it into a new structure it's so nice. Like there's that one store in downtown Toronto that used to be a church but now is
Anthropology.
Yes. I can't remember where it is, where that Anthropology
so
is.
it's like,
is it Queen Street?
Yeah, it's Queen Street. It's just like west of Spadina, I think.
Yeah, so that Anthropology, that specific one, used to be a church, but they adapted it and they gutted it, and now it's a retail store, but it looks so nice, and it's done really well, and that is a really good way to implement the circular economy.
Yeah, so like speaking of that, it's like I've noticed that a lot of cases where adaptive reuse is used, it's in mostly in like heritage buildings.
Yes, yeah.
Where you're required to keep heritage elements, but like in the case of Parkside, it was not a heritage element. It's just the best way to save money, but also the best way to save materials and resources.
Yeah, which are all benefits.
So, now that we kind of talked about that there being all benefits, I guess so why is the circular economy important?
So not only is the circular economy a way to use resources to its fullest, as we mentioned, but it's also a way to decrease the need for production. Because if we think about it, if we're reusing materials to its fullest potential, then the need for new materials is a lot less. And with that, production of new materials declines as well. And we as people, especially as people living in developed countries, are becoming more and more aware of impacts our everyday decisions have on the planet. And one of the most pressing concerns, at least recently, is the way developed countries are sending our production into developing countries just because it could be cheaper. The cost of labor is substantially less.
Yeah, significantly less.
But we really don't think about what impacts that has on the developing countries because the pollution and other adverse effects become more prevalent. So when we take the circular economy into practice, that means the production that's taking place in these developing countries can decrease. And with that, the adverse effects that I mentioned hopefully decrease with it as well.
So essentially, it benefits all of us when we participate in a circular economy.
Exactly, yeah.
So it seems that everything is pretty much like all beautiful and dandy and good about it. Are there any criticisms or limitations that we should know about?
So I don't really know if there are any criticisms or limitations, but what I can think of is, I guess the biggest limitation would be, how can we get people to participate and how can we get it across to the population's minds that this is a positive concept?
So do you have any like ideas that we can kind of promote or get more people to join? Because like I understand how like a lot of this could be like hard to visualize for people because the benefits only really show up in like 40 years time or 50 years time, so it's quite a long duration. So it's like it's hard to get people to buy in the beginning.
Yeah. Honestly, I think there really is no way to change the minds of people who are like dead set on not wanting to change. But to be honest, like I think one way that I am seeing a change in mindset is with the example of thrifting. Like a few years ago, so many people would be against thrifting because they would think, oh, like I'm better than that. I don't need to thrift. I don't need to get to that level because it's just they put such a negative connotation to thrifting. But now it's become trendy to thrift. And so I don't know, like it's not like the most professional way to say this, but I think that in order to get more people into the idea of a circular economy is just to somehow make it a trend. And like not as a trend that will fade in a couple of years, but like make it trendy enough that people want to look into it and want to see the differences it can create. And hopefully with that as a starting point, people will continue on and see the benefits of the circular economy.
So just assigning value and making it look
cool.
So anything else you would like to conclude with? Final notes for our audience maybe of getting them to get started in the circular economy or participating in it?
I guess, I mean, with us being like in our 20s, how we can benefit from the circular economy is seeing it as a way to save money. Because if we're constantly taking materials we already have and repurposing them into other objects or other items, other uses that we need, we don't need to go out and spend money to get new things. We can just constantly reuse what we already have. So not only is it good for the environment, but it's also good for our wallets if we really think about it.
And also it's like when you do or you're able to like maybe sell off your clothes, like don't try to replace it.
Exactly.
Because you don't.
Yeah,
you might not need it. Like don't just keep filling the hole when it's empty.
Like really think about what you need and if it brings value to your life.
Or as Marie Kondo says, if the item sparks joy.
Exactly. So before we end off, we just want to reiterate that everything mentioned in this episode is what we know to our best knowledge. And if you have any comments, questions, or have anything to teach us in return on this topic, we'd love to hear it. Because learning about the circular economy is the plan for now. Listen to our next episode to continue figuring it out with us.
Thanks for following along to this episode. If you liked it, please give us a like, review, and subscribe for more. Until then, follow us on Instagram at What's the Plan Podcast for what the next plan is.